All right, we can get started. Before we do roll call, then Trustee King is going to join us remotely. And so Jen, I believe you have a statement to make.
Yep. When do I need to do that? Sorry.
Right now.
Oh, okay. Sorry, 1 second. Um, so pursuant to Assembly Bill 2449, I'm requesting to participate remotely in the above meeting due to just cause, specifically child care responsibilities. I confirm that no individuals 18 years of older are present. Only one minor is present. During the meeting, I'll participate from a non-public location, and my remote address will not be disclosed. I understand that the board must take action to approve my remote participation request by majority vote.
All right, thank you, Jen. Yes,
Thank you.
and the board needs to make a motion to approve Trustee King's remote participation for tonight's special meeting. Can I get a
I
motion to approve?
move to approve Trustee King's remote participation in
Is
today's
there a
meeting.
second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
With that, we can commence with roll call.
Trustee Lee,
Here.
Trustee King,
Here.
Trustee Marquez. Here. Vice President Weekly,
Present.
President Wells.
Here. Good evening. Welcome to our October 16th, 2025 special meeting of the Redwood City School Board. Buenas tardes. Si requiere interpretación al español, por favor llama al 978-899-50-5137 y presione 837-704-1 y el signo de número. Si asiste a la reunión en persona, solicita un transmisor situado al fondo de la sala. Thank you for attending here or online. The board encourages you to participate and provide comments on tonight's study session topic. And since this is a special meeting, we'll be limiting comments to the study session item only. To speak, just complete a speaker's card at the entrance to the room, hand it to Evelyn, or if you're attending via Zoom, please complete the speaker's card online. It's linked from the agenda, or just raise your Zoom hand. And then, as always, to be fair to all speakers, we do limit public comments to 3 minutes per person per topic, unless otherwise noted. Not a lengthy agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Oh, can
Aye.
you
Use
do a roll
remote,
call vote?
so
I
we
take
have
it back.
to-
Roll call vote.
Sorry.
Trustee Lee,
Aye.
Trustee King,
Aye.
Trustee Marcus,
Aye.
Vice President Weekly,
Aye.
President Wells.
Aye. And that's the only motion we have to make tonight. Oh, for adjournment, we'll have to do it one more time. All right, then agenda is approved. We'll move on to public comment. I don't have any. Oops, I just raised my hand. I meant to check and see if people have their hand up. No, and Evelyn, there were none online? Okay. And then since the public comment part is coming so early in the session, maybe what I'll do is have the presentation go for a bit, and then we can see if there are public comments after we get through some of the presentation. Because I'm assuming Carl wants to hear some of the presentation first before speaking. Okay, so we'll do that. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Rick.
Good evening. Tonight's study session is focused on the facilities master plan, specifically the implementation plan that we're working to create, which builds upon the work completed under Measure T and guides the next phase of improvements funded through Measure S. The implementation plan translates the long-term goals outlined in the facilities master plan that was approved in June into a clear sequenced roadmap, identifying which projects should move forward first, how they align with available funding, and the steps needed to begin design and construction. It's also important to note that the implementation plan is not a list of projects ready for immediate construction or final commitments. Rather, it provides a structured framework to guide decisions about timing, phasing, and resource allocation as we move forward through our bond program. Tonight's discussion will center on the 5 key areas we outlined in the presentation and the board cover: project prioritization, design readiness, funding, community engagement, and implementation sequencing. And as a reminder, no formal action will be taken this evening. The goal is to gather input and ensure alignment before bringing the final implementation plan back for board approval. Joining me tonight to assist with the presentation are Eric Van Pelt and Nick Olson from VPCS, our bond program managers. And there is a chance that Martin Cervantes, our Director of Facilities, will join us either remotely or in person, but not for sure on that, to also assist with the presentation. So with that, I will turn it over to Nick and Eric to start the presentation that was shared with the board.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction, Rick. Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Baker, staff, and community. We're happy to be here at the study session to talk about the implementation plan of Measure S. We've put a lot of work into this, and we're excited to get some feedback. So I'll start with, bear with- out of the Zoom. Okay, here we go. So we'll start with what Rick mentioned, the reason we're here, to discuss how to spend the Measure S funds. And we wanted to start with a slide with some thought starter and discussion points that we will revisit at the end. So as Rick mentioned, the prioritization, the funding alignment, community and stakeholder input and engagement, operational and educational input, and long-term sustainability as some of our big topics. So we wanted to start with a brief overview of Measure T to kind of set up the discussion tonight. This page is actually a QR code and a link to the district's website that gives a great summary of Measure T. Kudos to our communications department who created that website and keeps it maintained. It's a great resource if you want some more in-depth information about Measure T or Measure S. So this presentation is 60 plus pages, so I'm not going to go through every slide. I'm going to try to do this as efficiently as possible so that we can have some time for discussion at the end. But a reminder and a thank you to voters for passing Measure T in 2015 in the amount of 193 million. You guys will see some common themes. There were some district-wide projects as part of this. Security upgrades, technology, fire alarm, EV charging, some solar arrays that will wrap up later this school year, exterior paint, ADA upgrades. So as we go through the next 10 to 12 slides, it's a breakdown site by site, but you'll see those common themes kind of throughout. I did want to pause here and just kind of recognize our Citizens Bond Oversight Committee and our chairs here in the audience. They are required by California Ed Code to review and report to the public on bond expenditures. And I will give the advertisement. They are looking for a couple extra members. So there's also a link in here if you want to know more information or apply for that. So kind of starting site by site. Again, I won't go through every one of these in detail, but I did want to highlight some of the bigger projects. This is just an alphabetical order, so no particular order of importance or anything. So at Adelante Selby, as you all know, they got a new entry building with admin and family center. At Garfield, they got a beautiful new 2-story building, library, amphitheater there. At Hoover, they got a brand new gym. At Kennedy, they also got a front entry building, family center, and STEAM classroom. At Orion, they received a new 2-story classroom building with admin, and also TK as part of that. And then the other big one I wanted to highlight was at Taft, who also got a new 2-story classroom building with admin and library and amphitheater as well. So again, just a quick review of Measure T, just to remind us all of what was accomplished in that bond, which was a lot. It was great. And again, thank you for the community for passing Measure S. So moving on to Measure S, I wanted to review the facilities master plan process. Again, there's a link here to the Measure S website if anybody wants more detail. So what is a facilities master plan? So this is our long-term roadmap for the next 10 to 15 years, facilities-wise, and sometimes beyond that. It's a comprehensive assessment. We did go to every site and did an assessment of the facilities, the systems, all of our site conditions. It gives us an opportunity to upgrade our ed specs to current and future needs. It gives the community an opportunity to have input. It helps us prioritize the framework, which is part of what we're talking about tonight, and align our financial strategies with possible other funding sources outside of the bond also. And we use it as an implementation tool, which again, we'll talk about tonight. So specifically to the Measure S master plan update, a reminder, Measure S was passed in 2022 with the amount of 298 million. The facilities master plan process started in May of 2024. Like I mentioned, we did site assessments, community meetings, a board study session, and in the facilities master plan, all of the identified projects were given a score, an indicator of quality that we'll talk about. And then during that process, some quick start projects were approved. The LED lighting, the HVAC upgrades, phase 1, which was Hoover, Roosevelt, Taft, and Adelante Selby. And then it was ultimately approved by the board in June of 25. So again, there's also a link here if you wanted to see the full master plan. It'll take you to the district's website where you can download that. So a reminder of our indicator of quality in the facilities master plan. You can see that the sections that were scored with the heaviest weight going to educational programs, then learning environments, and maintenance and operation. So this is a summary of the top 25 projects that all scored above 90. You can see a few themes here. There's a lot of modernization. There's a lot of TK and kinder campuses or upgrades. And there's a couple new buildings in here. And this QR code and link will get you to that IOQ spreadsheet so you can see beyond just this top 25, right? And it's separated by school. All right, so again, let's just go over quickly an update on the quick start projects, starting with the HVAC phase 1. So quick reminder of scope. The scope was to replace any HVAC unit that was 20 years or older and to add air conditioning into the classrooms. So this summer, we did the first phase at all 4 sites. These photos just kind of give you an idea of the scope of the work. This one in particular highlights the structural framing that's needed to place all these units on the roof. This example at Hoover, some rooftop on the left, mounted units, some ground mounted units on the right. When we could, we ground mounted. It's a little bit less expensive and obviously a lot less structural work. Another example at Hoover, on the left, these are the closet units. These are the heat pumps. And then the condensers you saw are on the roof. On the right is an example of, because the district did not have air conditioning in these classrooms before, we had to upgrade the electrical distribution panels at every site. So that's just an example of one. This example from Roosevelt is of all the rooftop work that had to be done. On the left, it's not just putting the units on the roof, but also all the electrical raceways for power, for controls, and more units mounted on the roof here at Taft, and some structural. Some package units were also included as part of this. So our libraries, our MUBs had rooftop package units that were just replaced in kind.
People may not be familiar with the term package unit.
It is when the heating element and the cooling element are all in one cohesive unit. Different from how the classrooms are, where the heat pumps were in the closet and the condenser was on the roof. So thank you. This is a great example of the controls upgrade that is part of this. So now it is part of a full building management system where our maintenance team can view, troubleshoot, diagnose from remotely from their office, and it's a lot more efficient because then they know from this reading that, hey, the fan's out, I'll bring a fan with me, I don't have to troubleshoot on site. So it's a great upgrade as for controls. So the other thing we did in virtually every classroom in the district, more than 350 mobile air conditioning units were installed this summer. And these are meant to be temporary until we could get to every campus and install air conditioning. As part of that climate control, we also installed roller shades at all the classrooms in the district that didn't have it before. And the lighting project, so this is an example of the same classroom before and after. The update here is more than half of the district sites have already been complete. So this is on schedule, actually slightly ahead of schedule, but this project's going great. So this is an example of a classroom, an example of a MUB and a library, an example of some of the controls as part of this. So these lights are fully dimmable. They're on occupancy sensors so that they're not left on all night. The picture on the right is the outdoor lighting. So the outdoor lighting is also included in this. And we've heard a ton of positive feedback about how this has affected indoor and outdoor lighting at all of our schools. Okay, so the next section here, we wanted to talk about some of the identified district-wide needs that were identified as part of the master plan process, but weren't necessarily in the facilities master plan document. So some of the rationale for why we do district-wide projects, you guys already know, it's energy savings, equity, district-wide amongst all sites. We get to create district standards, all other controls that we just looked at. And then some of the projects we already have started and done with the climate control, HVAC, roller shades. And as you guys already know, most of the campuses in this district are more than 50 years old, with 3 of them more than 80 years old. So many parts of our facilities are beyond their useful life and ready to be replaced. So one of those is the kitchens that we'll start with. So these bullet points were taken right out of the ed spec that was part of the facilities master plan. And again, this is just a roadmap of where we want to go with our kitchens. And you guys will recall that in 2022, California implemented a universal lunch program. So now our kitchens serve more students than they did in the past. And it also triggers some of this upgrades for equipment and storage of food. So we've identified the kitchens as one of the district-wide needs. Another one is our utilities. As I mentioned, our campuses are 50 plus years old, and some of our existing water lines are galvanized and they're time to be replaced. A lot of our underground sewer and storm drains, it's normal for utilities of this age to crack and leak and get root intrusion from trees, and at time to time they need to be replaced. So we've identified, some instances at each campus that need some infrastructure upgrade. Student restrooms was also identified as a district-wide need. Shout out to the maintenance department that has kept 50 plus year old facilities looking great and clean. But again, and some upgrades have been done, but some need a full refurbishment and upgrade. And again, this is verbiage right out of our ed spec on, restrooms for students and what we want out of them. I think this is our last district-wide need identified. Elevators. We have 8+ elevators in the district that are beyond their useful life of 20 to 25 years, and they're becoming harder and harder to maintain and more expensive to maintain, and they're ready to be replaced. So all that said, we did a subtotal here of district-wide needs that have been identified. And the lighting and HVC are already on there because those are something we've already committed to. And then the ones I just mentioned are added. We will see this summary a few times. So I just want to point out that the project contingency line and the district management line, you'll see will be the same number on all those slides because it's based on the full 298 million, right? So in this scenario, we summarized the district-wide projects and then, because we thought it'd be valuable for a talking point, what's remaining after we do those projects if we decide to move that direction. Yeah.
This might be a good break point in terms of if there's any questions to this point, before we get into some of the other projects that aren't on that list.
Sounds good. Does anyone have questions? Anything they want to clarify or comments about what we've seen so far? Jen, I'll go with you.
Sorry, just the priority ones is just that list that was on the ones that were over 90. Is that what that priority one line is?
Those are the district-wide identified. That maybe shouldn't say priority one. It should just say the district-wide identified needs.
Okay, so this doesn't include anything from that first list with over the 90.
Not yet.
Okay, got it.
Can you remind me where solar fits into this, or is that later?
Solar is measured T.
Oh, cool.
So, and I think that project, Martin knows more about it, wraps up this school year.
Got it. So that's fully funded by T and is not relevant to us then.
I believe it's T and state funding.
Yeah, it was the
Yeah, okay.
matching funds that we received from the projects done through Measure T that's paying for the solar. So it's under the umbrella of T.
But there's no Measure S funds planned for solar.
No.
Great. Thank you so much.
Just a question. I think you mentioned the project contingency and the district management cost lines. Those are going to be essentially fixed because for the entirety of the bond total. Is that right? Or like we're going to see that priority one is this, but those are not tied to priority one.
Exactly.
It'll be priority 2 and 3, and it'll still be the same number. Is that right?
Correct, because that's for the total of the bond.
What are the what are those line items composed of?
So project contingency, that it does two things. If one of the selected projects that goes on the implementation plan were to run over budget, you can pull from that to cover the costs. Whether it's the best plans always have some hiccups in construction. So what you don't want is to have a hiccup and then have to cancel another project on the list. So that contingency gives you a little bit of flexibility too. That contingency also gives the board a little bit of flexibility because bond measures take a while. They take 5+ years. And things change in 5 years. I mean, 6-7 years ago, we didn't talk about TK classrooms. That's all brand new. Climate change, that's something that's going on right now. That's one of the big reasons why we're installing HVAC and solar. So that also gives you some flexibility to adapt to regulations, to adapt to the economy, to adapt to anything that happens to come up during the bond program, and make some changes in direction without kind of making a huge shift.
And so I guess in theory, if we were only looking at the priority one and those were the only initiatives to go forward, not saying that is the case.
Yep.
If that were we would expect that the project contingency, probably a portion of that might be taken up because of true contingencies with those specific projects.
Correct.
But the bulk of it probably would not, because we'd assume that would go proportional to the rest of them.
Exactly. And to understand that contingency is layered. So inside these numbers too for the project, there's a little bit of contingency as well for the project. So the goal is, as we go down an implementation, I think Rick touched on this in the beginning when he talked, an implementation plan is a living document. Mm-hmm. So the goal is in a year, in 2 years, as we've started completing these projects, we come back and we say, hey, This project's finished under budget. This project's finished over budget. We're 2 years now into this. Let's release another, and I'm just using round numbers right now. Let's really release another $5 million to do another project or to add an enhancement to another project. And we can continue to have those conversations every single year until we kind of get to the end of the bond money.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then the district management costs, what is that?
District management, so that covers anything that happens at the district level, so across all projects that's required to manage the bond. So things like attorney's fees for every time you go to sell bonds, it costs about $500,000 to sell your bonds. The management costs, our costs, VPCS, a portion of that is paid out of district management. Any salaries for folks working directly on the bond for the district is paid out of that. So that's all kind of the incidental costs for the bond that come from the district and the needs.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. So when you talk about the A+ elevators, are there any schools that have more than one set of elevators? Like I was trying to think what schools that have the 2-story buildings that would need, like I know like Garfield is a new 2-story building, Orion as well, but and then how bad are they? Like how much longer can we, if we weren't thinking about elevators at this time? I know you need it.
I know we've worked with Martin and the maintenance team to identify at least 7 to 8 elevators that are beyond their useful life. I'm trying to think. Roosevelt is a great one off the top of my head that is not currently working. So we're, if you're going from the lower campus to the upper campus at Roosevelt, you have to take the stairs. And it's cost prohibitive to repair that.
Yeah, and what happens is as these elevators age, the parts to run these elevators get scarcer and scarcer. They stop supporting the parts, and so Martin and his team end up searching for parts everywhere. And it's not just the convenience factor; it also has an equity factor in it too, as well, because you've got students that have to use the elevator, not being able to get to where they need to when the elevators are down, and potentially when Martin's searching for parts for it, and that on the secondary market and all of that stuff that ends up happening. So it's definitely a major factor. And I see actually Martin on here raising his hand. So I think he wants to speak about the elevator. So Martin, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, let's have.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, Cecilia, so we do have a few sites that have 2 elevators, just like you mentioned, Garfield, and it does have the main building, which has one. And McKinley and North Star have their own. Clifford. So yeah, so besides that campus, all the other ones are single elevators. And they have reached their maximum life. Just like Eric was mentioning, the parts, the programming for these are pretty outdated. Past 25 years now on some of these buildings from that were installed back in 2000 or 1999. So we've been maintaining them as much as we can.
So, is it okay to interject a question? Okay. I'm a pilot, and you need to periodically go and refurbish engines, and like there's all sorts of different parts that have limited lifespan, right? And so part of how you do that is you have a set aside fund from hourly operating expenses, so that when inevitably you have some repair that needs to happen, you've projected that, you've predicted that, and you already have funds set aside for it. What makes me a little bit nervous at a high level in the conversation that we're having here is that we've had these elevators for a very long time, which is part of the point. We've been operating them for a very long time, and the depreciation schedule for elevators doesn't surprise anybody. Like, okay, fine, we need to replace them every 25 years, but we don't have funds set aside from our general fund to go and perform replacements like this, right? Which is why we need this extraordinary measure of having raised a taxpayer bond and paying for the replacement of the elevators with the bond money. So my concern is this, like for all the different equipment, facilities, buildings, et cetera, that we have here in the district, if we are not setting aside enough funds from our general yearly operation to be able to fix and repair these things on a timely schedule, is the game plan implicitly that we are going to need to raise a bond at least every 10 years or so in order to continue funding just the expected ongoing maintenance and operation of the facilities and plant in our district? Does the question make sense?
I understand where you're at going, David. To some degree, it's probably a mix of that, right? So, on an annual basis, Martin and his team receive allocated dollars of the budget for it's called RMA, routine restricted maintenance. That's allocated to them based on the expenditure budget. That's exactly what they're using that for, is to go and maintain and fix plant systems, right, throughout the district. But there's not often enough money to set aside for the next year or the year after that or 10 years down the road. That would come all from unrestricted general fund dollars to set aside that money.
So, is there a parallel universe in which it's possible for us to make a decision to have a separate restricted fund that is explicitly for the inevitable requirement to go and replace these pieces of physical plan, where we identify all the stuff across the district that has some finite lifetime, 10, 25, 50 years, whatever, and we sort of roughly map out when do we think we're going to need to replace this to have it be safe, to be able to find the replacement parts. These are all fine and reasonable arguments, but it also means there's such fine and reasonable arguments, we should be able to anticipate them. Right. And so there's the matter in front of us today, which is like, what do we do with the bond funds? And like, I think we're going about that discussion just fine. But I'm almost looking beyond this and assuming that we do all the reasonable, responsible adult things tonight with the bond money. And like, what happens then? Right. Do we need to go and create a new restricted fund into which we every year plan to set aside funds for the next set of elevators that need to get replaced, et cetera, so that we don't have to depend on raising another bond?
Well, we have that fund available now. Fund 14 is deferred maintenance, right? That we just are unable to fund at this point in time. Right.
We would need to make a decision as a district to put funds into Fund 14.
And I'll point out that we are going through the process right now of evaluating how we're spending our general fund, right? We're in a structural deficit and trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
As a trustee, you can certainly propose that we take some of the money that's already in structural deficit and start allocating that over to Fund 14 instead of the program services and staff that we've been considering trying to put it into. That's your prerogative, but that is what it would take. It would take, as we go through and figure out how do we deal with the financial realities of the district now, is it a priority we have to meet our minimum reserve. We obviously have to pay for, a certain set of stuff. Is the next priority to fund this maintenance or is it to fund the next program? I mean, those would be the trade-offs that you'd be looking at. I do also want to point out that there are occasionally state level efforts. It's not always local ones. Sometimes state bonds pass that come in and be able to do it. Sometimes there's state level initiatives that come in and help out with the operating costs. But yeah, it's sort of like, do you budget car repairs every year or do you budget having to buy a new car every year? And when your car dies, that can be very tough, those kind of things.
I think what I heard from Trustee Weekly was two separate questions. One is whether or not we have the planning or capacity to project what these types of repairs will be, and then the second is a funding, and I think they're discrete. But on the first point, I guess the open question, it seems like we do have numbers. So unless you tell me otherwise, I would assume that we do have those projections. We know what it's going to cost. But is that inaccurate?
Well, we know lifetime of product. Right. So we can reasonably assume that if we put an elevator in today in 2050, it's likely to be replaced.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
I don't know. That gives me assurance. It's not like we are just having elevators and hoping things go well. It's just that we have to figure things out as they go because there's an ever-changing landscape of things in terms of the finance.
But I think in some ways it is hoping everything goes well, right? I mean, we can't. It's not easy to raise additional revenue, right?
Right.
We have to have these services available, right? And so the work that Martin and his team does with, that seemingly small amount of money on an annual basis to keep it going for that 25 years, is what it's designed to do, right?
Yeah.
And deferred maintenance is part of every bond program.
Yeah.
Whether we'd have to do it every 10 years or not would depend on the different
Right.
areas and what other capital projects need to be done. So I'm not disagreeing with anything. It's just,
I guess it would be neat to know that for all the stuff we have in the district and roughly when we need to replace it and the cost of replacement when that's landing. So because that feeds into budgeting, right? So is that over the next 3 years, over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years, are we going to have a bunch of things land that we couldn't afford if we're fully funding if we're in deficit or close to deficit spending, don't have a rainy day fund that we can pull from and don't have further bond monies that we can use. Just it'd be very useful for the board to have that sort of early warning radar that, oh, by the way, we're going to need to do a bunch of this work like 6 years from now. The measure S is going to be depleted by then, and we won't have the money, absent some dramatic changes, we won't have the money from the general fund to be able to perform that work. Like just the sooner we can know that and plan for that, the better. But we can return to the schedule.
Yeah, so back on the projects. I don't know if if it's I didn't know which bucket to ask this in. So I'll just start at the district-wide one. But there was in the one thing that jumped off the pages of the facility master plan was the consistent need to replace portable infrastructure, portable housing with permanent. Um, so I didn't see it at all in the presentation. And so I wasn't sure, would that be a district-wide initiative? Like how should we be thinking about that? Is that even something that should jump up as a priority?
Well, most of our portables are actually the CDC buildings. I think the one-off is probably PE at Kennedy Middle School isn't portables. And it is on one of the lists and it's one of the higher IOQ scores. But we don't have a lot of portables district-wide other than the CDCs.
I see. So if I go back and look at the presentation, it'll be in one of the priority ones that on that.
Yes, it's in one of the scenarios that
Okay.
are coming up.
Okay, okay. That's what I kind of missed. And then the other thing was just I know we did efficient lighting and obviously the HVAC upgrades for climate, climate resilience. I mean, are there other projects that we should be thinking about for climate resilience if we wanted to make that a district-wide initiative? I know that in some of the sites they had like shade structure and things like that that were added in. But would that be a district-wide one, or is that something where again we would want to look at it as, um, you know, a site-by-site kind of priority project?
I think you would want to look at that one as a side-by-side priority project. You're spending a significant amount of HVAC money on HVAC. You're spending a significant amount of money on LED right now. You're also spending a significant amount of money from Measure T from the state and the state funding on solar. So the district as a whole is going in a pretty impressive direction already as far as that sounds. So I think that you kind of circle back and you take care of those things in these individual projects with what you can take care of. Because I mean, frankly, and this is nothing, the conversations we're having right now are nothing unique to Redwood City as far as the funding and the money go. Everybody has their own unique needs, but you have significantly more needs than you do money. So kind of getting into that prioritization is going to be crucial. So looking at what you've already done and thinking about that a little bit, and thinking about what the next steps would be, you've kind of knocked off the big items already.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
Yeah.
we definitely chipped away at the big ones. So cool.
It's impressive too.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt.
Bugbear for me on that topic is going to be batteries at some point, but that's somewhere stack ranked.
Well, I was just going to add on to that. Something that we didn't identify as its own project, but it's underlying with some of these district-wide projects is water efficiency. So as part of a restroom upgrade, a kitchen upgrade, underground utility upgrade, it helps district-wide with our water efficiency.
Yeah, and I think one comment on the kitchen one. I mean, we've really been, Rick and his team have been focused on, revamping our food service program. I think Richie might even be online. So that feels like a good investment district-wide for sure.
So one thing I'd be remiss to not point out, and it's a little bit of fly in the ointment here, is that there's another very important set of meetings that are happening in parallel with our discussions here on Measure S, and that's our Strategic Resource Alignment Advisory Committee that's talking about how to resolve our deficit spending. And some of the suggestions that are coming out of that may directly impact what facilities expenditures we want to make and in what campuses and how, because some of those recommendations may turn into different things happening at different campuses, the possibilities of school closures as well. And so it would be what we would want to avoid was an uncoordinated effort where we decide, yeah, we're going to spend lots of money invested in this campus, and then we decide a month later, oh yeah, and we're leaving that campus, right? So the output of that committee, I think, will land in January, if I recall correctly. So it is a ways off, but not a ways off. So I think that my druthers would be that for some of the things that are just like absolutely need to happen, no regrets, kind of regardless of what the output is, that is great, the full steam ahead. But I almost want to slow roll some of the other commitment to expenditures until we know what the outputs and recommendations of that committee are, just to make sure that we're prioritizing the actual go forward plan here. Does that make sense?
That completely makes sense, and actually, it's something again that I mentioned non-unique problems, not a unique problem. So I mean, part of this too is getting a little bit of direction now. But part of that conversation as we continue to work with Rick will be the next step of this. After we get some direction on projects, we'll be putting together a schedule, and maybe some of those sites that are the sites that we're talking about making some changes with, those kind of slide to the back of the schedule to give us some more time to reevaluate. And then once January comes, we can come back to the board and say, hey, let's update the implementation plan again for this year. Let's look at the schedule. Let's look at the budget one more time and see what we need to shuffle around as we keep that communication. That's one thing that's great about Rick is he's talking to us about that already. And we're having those conversations internally to make sure that we don't get out in front of our skis here and build something that's not going to be needed.
Yeah, and I agree. I think we can have the discussion about what the priorities are, independent of like the execution and the timeline there. But it is the right thing to do, and we certainly wouldn't want to make a decision with bond expenditure that locks us into something that we would regret, from other decisions. So.
Can I just make a
Yeah.
comment to that? I agree completely, and it is discussions that we have been having about what may happen, what could happen, what likely won't happen too, right? And some of even the projects that were on this identified needs list, I'll just pick on one. Some of the utility upgrades would have to happen at any campus, regardless, because we want to be able to potentially use that campus as, right? So
Like I said, some of these things are like low regrets. It kind of it doesn't really matter what you decide to do. It just kind of needs to be done. Right. Yeah.
We don't want to go and build a new building on a campus though that we might not be using, but infrastructure wise on some of these smaller things need to be done so we can bring a tenant in.
Yeah, I'd almost say that most of these that are district wide feel like there are no regrets. Maybe there may be one or two campuses where we wouldn't do an upgrade if we knew, but yeah, other than that, like utilities, kitchens makes sense. Shall we move on to the next section?
Yeah. So the next section is the start of us talking about site-specific projects and ones that were scored on the IOQ. So we wanted to start with the transitional kindergarten and kindergarten projects because that was a common theme in the top 25 IOQ scores. As you guys all know, Assembly Bill 130 now makes free universal transitional kindergarten for all 4-year-olds at every campus, or every district. So this fundamentally shifts facilities wise for us because, as you can see from our ed specs, TK classes require more space, special restrooms, special equipment. So it's harder to house those grades in a standard classroom. So it created a need not just for our district, but for every elementary district in California. So I'll go through site by site and just highlight what the facilities master plan identified as the TK project for that campus. 8 were identified in the facilities master plan. So again, just in alphabetical order, I'll orient you to how I set up these slides. So the top right-hand corner is a campus-wide map with a circle around the proposed project area. The bottom right map is a zoomed in look of that area. On the left is your IOQ score from the FMP, and then a short description of what that project would entail. So here at Adelante Selby, it is a modernization of 3 different buildings to kind of create a TKK section of the campus there. Over at Clifford, this would be a renovation of building A. There's already kinder classrooms in that building, so it'd be renovation of a different part of that building for TK and kinder. At Garfield, it is reconfiguration of existing space that kinder is already in to facilitate TK and kinder. At Henry Ford, the facilities master plan actually proposes demolishing the existing kinder building and building a new building for TK kinder and CDC there, which removes one of the portables. At Hoover, it is a new TK building and renovation to the existing kinder building. This playground was actually replaced already as part of Measure T. Over at Roosevelt, the entire upper campus is primarily kinder now. So it'd be a renovation of the entire upper campus there to accommodate TK. At Roy Cloud, this is another new building on the north side of campus. This one, constructability wise, would probably be the easiest for access and minimum disruption and no interim housing, but it creates a kinder complex on that side of campus. Taft, it is a renovation of 2 buildings, one to accommodate TK, and then where TK is would become the CDC area. So those were the 8. So we put together a sample implementation plan for that scenario. The gray is the district-wide projects that we've already seen. And then we added in the TK here. Again, the project contingency and management lines are the same. But if we moved in this direction, this just shows budget-wise, we could afford to do this just under our 298 million. So the next slide just adds 2 columns to the right that could be a possible timeline and schedule for this implementation plan. And obviously we can talk about this, and this is adjustable. Right now, the priority is just the new buildings, because sometimes it's a quicker design and approval process with DSA. But this is all adjustable. And at the bottom, you can see this is about a 6-year implementation plan.
Let's take questions.
Yeah.
David.
Yeah, so I have really mixed feelings about this, because like we've got to support TK, and TK is great, and there's like some very good academic work that shows that taking kids into TK results in better performance in kindergarten and so forth. That's a lot of I'm just, this is not the first time I've seen it, but like as I'm chewing on it, this is a lot of TK rooms, and it's a lot of our budget. I have some worry of a possibility of over-rotating and overbuilding on the TK front. So I really want to make sure that we double click on the projected demographics, that we're going to be filling all of those TK rooms, because if we go off of bad projections and overbuild TK, where there's a bunch of requirements for TK over even kinder that maybe make it a less fungible classroom as well, so more expensive to build and a little bit less fungible. useful in terms of just being able to be used for other purposes as well. I really want to have very high confidence for every TK room that we build that we can fill that room with TKs. Like, do we believe that we have the demographic projections that give us the confidence that when these things are ready and they're opened and serving TKs, that they will be filled with TKs?
No, we don't have that confidence at this point in time. Yes, our TKs have grown, as you're well aware of, but as we look at the demographics and as we are planning for enrollment starts in 2 weeks. So by the time I come back to this group in February with recommendations for the reduction regarding the budget and so forth, I will have a good handle on that enrollment and what it looks like. TK has been one of the classrooms when parents are enrolling, they start right away and they get it done because they want to get into certain schools, especially their neighborhood school if that's what they want, or if they want their school of choice. So they're right there right away. So I will have those numbers for the 26-27 school year, probably by winter break, exactly what it looks like for the coming year. Now, this year, all 4-year-olds came in. So we have 17 TK classrooms. Rick and I have been talking along with our enrollment. Jorge Quintana also does our enrollment, and we don't think it's going to be 17 classrooms next year. So
It'll be really great in just a few weeks to get that concrete data about what next year enrollment will be. I would love to be able to supplement that with some further demographic projections, just looking at county birth rates and the like to get some rough sense of, because again, this is a multi-year thing. It's not like we're going to snap our fingers and like in the fall, all these TK classrooms will be built and ready to serve. So when we are looking at lighting these up, how large are, how many TKs are we expecting? And are we building appropriately for the population that we expect? Because overbuilding would be really sad. It would be a waste of money and be building spaces that might be less fungible for our use.
Similar point or question or a related question, aside from just the overall number projections, I was just taking a look at some of them and I recalled that Hoover, for example, I think there's quite a bit of capacity existing right now compared to the enrollment. Is the reason for, I guess I assume with the TK priorities, the idea is that we are building or modernizing facilities specifically for TK. Is that because the existing capacity that's not currently being used is unsuitable or just out of date, or what is the thinking?
It's generally because the rooms that are existing, even if there's empty rooms, are not the size of the required for TK. So TK has a different space requirement.
Okay.
Along with restroom facilities in the room.
And this is why I think it's so important that we get the projections right, because this is a huge expenditure to be able to facilitate taking that TK population. So
Are all sites that offer kindergarten, we have to offer TK to all 4-year-olds that want to enroll. Does it have to be at all sites that offer kindergarten, or can it be can limited sites be designated for TK? I mean, I don't know if that's the best way to think about this, but I'm just curious, is that even like if your neighborhood school has kindergarten?
Yeah, so we don't have to offer TK at every school site. We have to offer a seat to every student.
A seat to every student, yeah, okay.
for example, if you remember last year, we did not have a TK we did not have one at Garfield.
Right, yeah, I was actually kind of surprised to see Garfield here.
Right, yeah, we did not have one at Garfield, and the number at Garfield at this point in time is quite low too.
Yeah, okay.
And just to compound on that, there are some districts that are building TK centers and one TK center for the entire district. It's so just kind of to re-emphasize the point.
Yeah, I mean, the specialized need for the classroom sort of kind of feels like that. Although then you've got the whole commute problem for that. Yeah.
They're way different.
Yeah. But that might be one of the ways to, prioritize this. The other thing is I can't remember, like, for each of these sites, like what is the state of the TK classroom for them now? Are they in one that's too small, doesn't have a containment? So all of these sites that are identified here are ones where we have TK classes that are, and the classroom is insufficient.
Correct, or they're having to walk students to the
Yeah.
restrooms and have additional personnel to help assist
Yeah.
with that so that
Yeah,
they're
okay.
monitored.
So I vaguely also recall that if we were to be out of compliance with TK regulations, there are penalties associated with that. Is that right?
There are penalties. You are to, right, today it's 20 students in a classroom with 2 adults. Now you can go beyond that ratio, but anything over that 20 requires another adult to come into the classroom.
Otherwise, financial penalty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I personally I think TK is a priority. Like I think we do need to offer like classrooms that are appropriate, that meet the code that we want to offer for the environment for our kids to be able to have TK. The nuance is the part that's just the tough part about, okay, where we don't need all of this TK that's listed here. And figuring out how to get that part in, I think is the more challenging part. But the need seems like it's a good priority to say, yes, we need to do something for our TK classrooms. Just maybe not all of them.
And I think
Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Eric, but I believe in the facilities master plan. Generally speaking, there is an exception of Garfield being one of them, that it was based off of what we have now. It wasn't necessarily built for immense growth or decline of TK. And we're at an interesting point with TK, right? This is the first year of full year implementation. Dr. Baker mentioned that when he was speaking. And because of that, with the students coming in TK, we're not seeing the bump in K anymore, right? So they're choosing to come earlier, and we're not seeing that big bubble, if you will, come in kindergarten anymore. And so after this year, which is really our baseline year of full year implementation of TK, we're likely to see the same decline that we were seeing 2 years ago projected starting at kindergarten, right? It's going to take that same path, right? And it's going to probably contribute a few more students potentially to the decline going through 33, 34 that we had done previously. So that's something that we're also very aware of, looking at this and how that may impact, as Dr. Becker also mentioned. It'll be very interesting to see our early returns, if you will, on enrollment when that starts on November 13th or 14th, to see where we're coming in initially as we, push that out. Birth rates are low. In what was it, a year and a half ago, the demographer report, it was 0.39 students per any size dwelling, right? That's very, very low. I think it got all the way up to 0.46 on a single family home. But of any size dwelling, it was 0.39. I can tell you in another district I was in, we got worried when it went below 1.5 per any size dwelling. So we're looking, 3 families have to move in to produce 1 student.
I feel like this is underscoring my point that like
Absolutely.
I worry about us undergoing enormous expenditure, a very large chunk of the bond measure that we have here to build out a huge quantity of TK classrooms that may end up mostly empty by the time we finish building them.
Yeah, there's definitely that consideration. It's something we've been talking about, especially on some of these school sites, right, that are more notable than others. Looking at maybe we don't do the modernization as stated in here, but we do something to some rooms for a light modernization to make them accessible for TK. Put in some other measures to assist with that, so that we're not spending good money after bad.
Right. So, I mean, something that I feel like would be helpful here is just getting a sense for the current district as is, before we do any of this work. How many TK classrooms do we have? What is our capacity and what is our enrollment? And then sort of projecting through for the next, 5 to 10 years, what do we project TK enrollment's going to look like? Where's the delta for how many more classrooms does that imply we need? And then we can do the exercise of like, how do we assign those extra N classrooms that we're going to need to different campuses, because that'll right size our build. Because I can't look at this and say, oh yeah, that's the right build that we should do. We can say high level things that make sense, like investing in TK is a good idea, being compliant with state law is a good idea, and then P.S. it's also a good thing for the students to be able to start schooling earlier. We can agree with these things, but to look at this plan and say this is the best possible use of taxpayer money to build out these TK classrooms, I don't feel like I have enough data to be there right now.
And agree. And that's why, we didn't bring an implementation plan for approval. We brought it for discussion. And that's why you'll see on the different scenarios, perhaps we should have started with scenario C first, the blank one. Um, uh,
I wasn't sure if that was a typo or not, but I'm glad that you said that.
Put them in the other order, little bit more and then a full one. But regardless, this is for the discussion, right? So that we get the feedback. So when the team goes back to work on addressing some of these concerns and questions that came out so far tonight, I'm sure there'll be more that we can take that into account as we're planning, right? There's obviously a concern stated here about TK and enrollment in the coming years. We have that same concern, right? As it's been well documented in many meetings, we're on that curve to go down another 1,000 students in the near term, not go up another 1,000 students, right? So another thing we have to remember with TK is it's not mandatory, right? Similar to kindergarten, parents have a choice. So we also have to deal with they want to go to school A, but it's full. They have an opportunity to go to school B, but they choose not to because it's not what they had planned for their 4-year-old. So that is something that we can't always evaluate in terms of, well, we know that 7 kids are going to turn down any offer, but we have to take that into account somehow as well in terms of TK capacity.
Cool. I want to just time check real fast. We're an hour into the meeting, 56 minutes on this topic. Thanks for the up counter. Are we pacing okay? Are we pacing okay for the
I
topic?
think we are. We're down to the slides that we figured
Okay.
would be most of the conversation.
Great.
And if I may, this conversation segues perfectly into the next scenario
Yeah.
that we were going to talk about.
Can I just check real fast, Jen? Did you have any comments? You don't have to. I just wanted to make sure we didn't ignore you for being online.
No, all good. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Cecilia or David? No. Okay, great. All right, perfect. Let's go.
Okay, great. So again, this conversation we kind of thought would happen. So the next section of this presentation is the next scenario of the other identified high IOQ scoring projects. So this slide you guys have actually seen. I just wanted to revisit before we see the next slide. This is the slide we saw before about the district-wide projects. And then at the bottom, the total kind of remaining if we decide to do all those. So these are the other identified priority projects with high IOQ scores, again, in no particular order, but I'll go through them kind of one by one. The modernization at Kennedy for PE that would remove the portables. A new admin library classroom building at MIT was a high IOQ. And we added in here, you'll see a column for interim housing, which I think is valuable to the discussion, right? A lot of these modernization projects or to demo and build a new building will require some amount of interim housing. And we did a cost estimate on what we think that would be.
And to get the total cost, do we add the both columns or does the cost estimate include the interim housing in the cost estimate? Perfect. Oh, sorry, Nick, can you turn your microphone on? Yeah. Did that get on? I can't see if the red light's on.
Yep, I can hear now. Thank you.
Okay. We're figuring out the microphone situation here. We'll need just a minute.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Mic check.
They just came back.
I'm ready.
You know what? I'm going to take the blame for this one. Apparently, the screen is a touch screen, and there's some powerful buttons on the bottom that do something that I have no idea what they are. But I must have accidentally pressed one of it because I unpressed something, and everyone's working again. Now that I know I can do that, though, watch it out.
Yeah. So to the project list, again, it was the themes we talked about earlier, a lot of modernization. Hoover is actually kind of split up into two sides of the campus because it's such a big campus. So modernization there, modernization of the non-TK classroom buildings at Adelante Selby, modernization of building A at the MIT NSA campus, including the auditorium and parking lot. That made the list because it could be a mutually beneficial project to those two campuses. Similarly, with the auditorium and parking lot, that could benefit those two campuses, but also district wide. I know the entire district uses that auditorium. And modernization to the multi-use building at that same campus. And then new admin classroom building at Clifford.
And
So that
remind me
would
what the
replace
interim
that.
housing column is?
What's that?
The interim housing column. We see.
So interim housing is it's basically a spot for the functions of that building to go where while it's getting remodeled. So if we're modernizing a building in a classroom building, we're gonna have to bring in portables to put the kids in while the construction's going on.
So these estimates are based on how many interim classrooms or spaces we'd need to provide, right? If it's admin or library or, a specialty space, how we would provide that as interim housing also. And then the next slide is just the breakdown similarly of the TK projects, with the column added for the interim housing and the IOQ scores. So I don't know if we want to pause and talk about this list because scenario 3 is actually what Rick mentioned. It's kind of the blank slate. It's did we miss anything that should be on one of these lists?
This also gives an opportunity if you go back, Nick, just a couple slides to. Oh, no, go now. No, there. So on here, the first scenario, A should have been C, right? That one is here's what an implementation plan could look like. We chose TK because there was enough. I'll say determined need that if we spent the money, it would take up the remainder of the bond dollars after the district-wide identified need. This one looks at district-wide identified need as placeholders in this plan, and then the ability to plug and play projects into the plan. Although I'm not able to do that on this presentation, it's something that we could certainly do and move projects in and out to see what the cost constraints are of that. And I'll ruin the next slide as we get to that. The last one has no projects on it other than HVAC and the lighting project, where any projects could be placed in there with the estimated remaining Measure S budget of this one of about 153 million. And I believe the other one was 112 or 122, something like that. 110. So any of those projects that were identified or any other projects, right? It doesn't have to be on that list. Those were just high IOQ scores, or I'll say mutual benefit to multiple sites of the auditorium being one that every school who uses that auditorium would have benefit from that as they use it on an annual basis. Would allow a different opportunity to plug and play, if you will, some of the projects into here that would determine the implementation plan in the future that we brought back. So certainly we're not expecting 4 or 5 implementation plans tonight where you're plugging things in, but we wanted to give you that opportunity to think about and we'll provide direction of how you'd like to see it come back or distributed for consideration prior to even approval.
Should we let's maybe talk about scenario two. Here's how I'm going to propose we do from here. Talk about scenario two. That's the other priority projects for a little bit. Take a break, hear our public comment because we'll have gone through all the scenarios. We'll have a blank slate to go over, and then we can move on to the kind of the scenario three one, the plug and play. Does that make sense? Anyone have questions, comments on the scenario two?
I have a quick question. Is there an Excel sheet or something with kind of these on it already, or?
The IOQ scores are at the link in the top right-hand corner. If you click that, it'll get you to the spreadsheet of the IOQ.
And I think that with the does that have the cost estimate in it too?
It has the cost estimates from the FMP without interim
Yeah,
housing
interim
added
housing. Okay,
onto
yeah.
it.
Ah, perfect. Sorry, I didn't click the link. Thank you.
Because I'm guessing your question, Jen, is there some place where we can go and model it on our own, like
Yeah,
in our
yeah,
private
thank
time
you.
to see what fits and what doesn't? Okay.
Yeah, and that's one thing. If the board thinks that would be helpful, we can definitely put like a spreadsheet with those interim housing numbers together, and that would give you a little bit better idea. I see a
Yeah,
thumbs up
yeah,
there.
that'd be great.
Yeah, we can do that. No problem.
Any other question on the identified projects for scenario two?
A quick question for clarification purposes. When we talk about new administration building, like how does that project, how does that affect our overall well-being of our students? I understand it's the first place that visitors and parents come to, but I'm just wondering if we're being conscientious of rather, and I know that it's probably very important to do that, but how is that more important than, for example, remodeling a classroom or something else? So if you could explain that to me,
You
please.
have to start. Yeah. So I think it's a very good question, Cecilia, in terms of the impact. And I think what we heard most about, probably from every school site when we were going through the committee meetings and getting feedback, was it wasn't about necessarily having a place for the principal to sit. It was a place to have additional rooms for student supports, right? Either be counseling, uh, small group instruction, conferences, that type of thing is really geared around. We don't have enough space to house our people to provide these services. Sure, everyone wants the new admin building for people walking in and see a beautiful building, but it was more what I heard was for the support services that they don't have room for, that they're walking down to the third hallway into the closet that they've converted into a one-to-one meeting room or something like that. So it's to give additional opportunities for those supports.
If I could add on
Please.
specifically to this list, it became a project at MIT NSA because those two campuses are on the same property. So as we did the facilities master plan and got feedback, both of those campus wanted a more identifiable main office because there's some confusion when parents or visitors come by that campus. And then for Clifford, I think it was because the location of that current admin is kind of at the front right corner, it was less efficient. And the new facilities master plan kind of moves that to the more the center of campus.
There's one project here that's sort of listed as a district-wide benefit, and that's the auditorium at MIT NSA, and I know multiple schools use it. Could you describe like what's the scope of that work? Like, is it all new seats, like new sounds, like what would be the end result of a project like that?
A full modernization. So yes, new seating finishes. I predict that new lighting and all that stuff. But a full renovation to that building. So systems, although we're doing HVAC as part of another project, but also the parking in front. That campus has a big grass area in front that is underutilized.
Yeah.
And some additional parking would be helpful at that site.
And then we may not know this right now, but like what's the use rate of the auditorium? I know many schools do things there. Do all schools use it? Do they use it multiple times a year? Like what's sort of the book rate of it?
It's multiple times a year, and the majority of our schools do use it. One that doesn't is Hoover because they have the
They use
gym,
the
and so
gym,
they're
yeah.
utilizing that. And so TAF kind of utilizes it also, gym if needed,
The Hoover Gym. Okay.
and so does Garfield. But for the remainder of our school sites, they definitely use the auditorium
Yeah.
throughout the
Okay.
year.
Any other questions? I'm going to pivot and take public comment. I know I have the one speaker's card. I don't know if there are any online. I didn't see any in those Zoom cards. Okay. Carl, you're up for public comment. And then we'll resume our discussion on the blank slate.
Red light. Love the discussion this evening. Carl Landers. I'm here really to represent the taxpayers, I guess, not the CBOC. And wasn't sure how the discussion would go this evening, but I really respect the healthy discussion, especially Trustee Weekly with your questions. I think these go to the heart of the matter. Are we spending this money in the right place? There's no guarantee in 10 years we'll pass measure whatever and get another 500 million. So I really want to talk about two things. One is something that I've been passionate about throughout this 2-year process, which is community involvement. And I think it's been lacking. And I want to encourage again the board to seek out more of the community to be involved. The community was surveyed about, and a committee was formed about the cost reductions. The superintendent search had a survey go out to collect community feedback. This is very important how we're going to spend the 100 million of the 300 million has already been spent. You can see it in HVAC and lighting. So we have 200 million left. How would the community like to see that spent? Now that there's a master plan, what would they prioritize? So I encourage you to do a survey, get the word out. I wouldn't judge attendance tonight as about the passion of the community. This wasn't a well advertised topic. The community didn't know what the study session was going to be about tonight. I think you'd have had more people here. So community involvement, I think, is important, and I'd like to really encourage that because you're going to spend this taxpayer money, and there's no guarantee we're going to go back and get more of it. The second thing I want to say is I would really encourage you to think big. When we saw those slides that you showed on Measure T, there were beautiful new school buildings at many campuses, and I've been visiting them lately to see the HVAC and lighting upgrades. And it's great. It's inspiring, I think, to the community to see that their money is being spent on something that they can see and feel and touch. And the Hoover Gym is used by the community. It's an amazing asset for the district. When I see like replace a pipe underground, I don't think the taxpayers are going to be inspired by that. That's deferred maintenance that the district should have been banking, to your point, David, for years. And I just want to remind you, if the ballot measure, Measure S, says, hey, we're going to raise money to repair and upgrade science, technology, engineering, arts, and math classrooms and labs, make safety and security improvements, upgrade heating, cooling, and electrical systems, and construct new sites and facilities. That's what they voted for. Nothing in here says replace an elevator that we didn't plan and budget for replacing, or replace a water pipe or irrigation line. So I would really encourage you, as you think about this money that you're going to spend and prioritize, to think big. What are the impact projects? Do 2 or 3 big things and budget for the maintenance that needs to happen, but do a few big things that are going to really make a difference.
We have to limit it to 3 minutes. But thank you for your comments. And of course, we are about to have a discussion about open-ended scenario. So unlike public comment on things off the agenda, you're more than welcome to incorporate the Carl's comments into the discussion tonight because it is on topic with the agenda. I stole the gun. Jumped the gun here though. Did you want to do a presentation about like what scenario 3 is?
Well, as we mentioned, scenario 3 is really, we've already committed to lighting and HVAC. Is there anything that we missed on this list? So to facilitate the discussion, I'm happy to toggle through whatever slide you guys want to see. The next one is back to our discussion points. But you guys direct me of what you want to see to help facilitate the discussion.
I have one more request on the Excel sheet if possible. I know we ranked safety on the IOQ on the lower side because we were prioritizing programs and achievement and all of that in the ranking. Is there a way to just note which ones were kind of asked for from a safety standpoint?
Yeah, that's something we could do a little bit of research on and get back to the board on. No problem.
Yeah, just a little asterisk would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Let's go through, let's talk about priorities. I think what we're trying to get to tonight is really what are we thinking that the priorities are? And how are we kind of thinking about it so that we can have a framework to work through for implementation. Um, I can say for certain, I agree with I think the kitchen is a good upgrade, a good use of the funds. We're investing a lot in that, so that district-wide priority kind of resonates with me. TK improvements, I don't think we need to deploy the full plan that's there, but it's hard to imagine, not doing anything for TK classrooms. It feels like that's a real need. Yeah, beyond that, I don't know. Those are kind of like when I think about what the priorities are. I'm curious how other board members are thinking about either what was shown here or what you think wasn't shown here. And love to start hearing how you're thinking about prioritizing projects here and what kind of guidance you want to provide for the team. Yeah, David.
I think for me, it's largely aligned with that. I think the district identified priority one bucket that seems reasonable to me in terms of, I think all of these things are very clearly and directly correlated with student experience and student environment, including like elevator upgrades. Again, if we have special needs students who have that requirement, then that's very tangibly going to it. I think TK also makes sense for all the aforementioned reasons, but I think we should exercise caution with the way in which we prioritize the sites that we're doing. Again, we're just in a very challenging time right now in terms of projections and everything else, as well as the general budget environment, as is well known now. So I think we have to do something, but I agree. I don't know if it's prudent necessarily, and it doesn't sound like the plan would be anyway, to basically build all of them right now, or even staggered, like without any sort of further analysis.
And then was there anything that you think was missing, a priority that you had sort of felt should have been considered but didn't quite make it onto the?
Not for me.
Okay. Cecilia, how are you thinking about the prioritization here?
So definitely, again, TK, and I'm with you, well, with everybody, I guess, to David's point. Like one of the things that I was thinking as Nick was talking about Roosevelt and how the upstairs, it's mainly like kinder, but it would be renovated to obviously operate more on the TK side. So that's another thought where maybe we don't have to open up a TK in every single school site, but maybe a close proximity to where parents can take their TK students to a certain site, whether they're going to want to stay there for a kinder or move the following year. I know it's something that, when we talked about the bond, TK was not a thing. So, but it is very important. Although it is an optional for parents, but I'm assuming that most parents would want to take advantage of that. And then with the clarification and thank you, I remember with the admin building and the type of services, obviously we want the students to be serviced. And I'm just wondering if it's there, it's for a reason, because the principals and staff members that were part of those conversations were there. I'm just wondering too, if, say, rather than renovating an admin building, are there other places where that could be not necessarily a new building, but maybe make more modernizations to a classroom? If obviously that's not something that's a possibility. Again, I totally understand. One of the biggest things, and obviously we want to make sure that we do what's best for everyone. One of the biggest things for me is in the past, we did, of course, the gym for Hoover School, and that's great. And the community uses it. The way I see it with Hoover is they need more than just the gym. The gym is for extracurricular activities for students, and I just feel those students do need a little bit more academic. I know that one of the modernizations is the TK and kinder, so we want to make sure that we do something for a school site that actually needs, and everybody needs it, of course. But I just want to point out, for personally, I know that this is not to make decisions, it's just a discussion. That's something that I would like for us to really think about Hoover in the future, because again, it's great that we have a beautiful gym, but I just feel that they need a little bit more than just the gym. So those are my points. Thank you.
And so modernization for Hoover, I think covers what you were talking about from the priority projects. Is that what you're saying, or were you thinking that there was a project that wasn't included there for Hoover?
So maybe just to Carl's point, I know that he says, let's think big. When we look at all the different projects, I know Hoover is one of the priorities, to where we perhaps think about what would make, I don't know how to put it together because it's not to make more sense, but what would be more beneficial to a specific school site. So in Hoover's case, yes, the modernization of the admin building and some TK and kinder classrooms, I believe. I forget what else, because there was two parts for Hoover. So yes, that's something that could move forward. I'm just wondering if, looking at the big picture and all the other school sites, if Hoover would be one of those sites that would be priority on the priority. Because again, Hoover just, I shouldn't say just, because they did get some ADA compliance. So they did get more than just the gym. So it's just, I'm just looking out for Hoover so that if we're gonna do something, for sure Hoover gets I don't know how to put it. Again, everyone else matters.
Yeah,
I
I get what you're
understand.
saying. You're saying, hey,
It's
Hoover got
just-
this great gym, but that's not enough.
That's
It's
not-
not sufficient. Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
So I would like to see, and again, I know this is just a conversation. It doesn't have to be a final decision. It's just, I just want to put it out there because I feel that they do need something more than just that.
Yeah, and so are you proposing that a way we should think about prioritizing is go make one, or instead of spreading across a bunch of district-wide initiatives across all school sites, are you saying maybe we should be thinking about prioritizing one or two sites and making them really good?
Yes.
And push that in and kind of look at prioritize our sites that we want to go for as
Yes.
a different way of thinking about prioritization.
Correct.
Okay. Cool. Because yes, I'm looking back at the Measure T slide, and it was a gym, picnic tables, play structure, TKK play structure, and MUV backup generator. But I don't think Measure T did anything for classrooms at Hoover. Yeah, didn't do anything for classrooms at Hoover. That's a good point. Haven, thoughts about prioritization?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at a bunch of this stuff, it's like it's all reasonable and appropriate, but I feel like there is a je ne sais quoi that's missing in terms of like something that's deeply inspiring, and to a certain degree, like have something in there that's a little unreasonable. You know, you're on the right track with design thinking if some of the ideas you're throwing out are genuinely bad ideas, right? And so I feel like to a certain degree, we haven't heard enough really bad ideas. Do we need to build out a biochemistry lab? Do we need to build out robotics lab? Like do something that's interesting and in line with the text of what the voters voted for in Measure S. I really do appreciate your remarks and the reading out of the measure to keep us beholden to that. Um, I think that would be neat, and I would love to at least have that in the cards for things to consider that are kind of flagship, unreasonable, interesting concepts, right? That are in the mix. I think the other component that I wrestle with here is that uh, other than making sure that everyone who wants to go to TK can go to TK, where I feel like the evidence is very strong for that, most of the other things that we're looking at investing in here are somewhat indirect when it comes to dollars input to academic achievement output, right? Because our job number one is making sure these kids get a great education, right? And making sure that there's a great kitchen to make great food, to make sure that like the food at school is really good. It's like I'm for that. Those are good things. My kids go to these schools and I'd love for them to have good lunches, but it's also like many steps removed from, and then they got an A on their test. And so I would love for their I would love for a lot of the grounding that we're using in deciding what projects do we back here to be as aligned as possible with things that are likely to drive student success. To Cecilia's point about like, it's great to have an awesome gym, but like, that's probably also not going to help anyone ace a test, right? It's good that it's there. I'm not saying I regret that, Hoover's got an awesome gym, but I think really just focusing on what are the things that we can do that help drive academic achievement. Some of those things may not even be super expensive, right? Like, so there's some research on the hallway libraries, for instance, right? Which are pretty inexpensive to go and put in. If we go and like map that out, that can actually drive increases in literacy rates, right? So are there projects like that we're thinking about putting in that are grounded in research for what's actually going to drive academic achievement differences in the students?
I'll just say I agree in the spirit. I don't know. My view is it's a little bit challenging, specifically in the context of the bond, because it is tied to facilities. I would hope, and I think a lot of the discussion on the other budget committee, I'm not part of it, but I imagine a lot of that is focused on the programmatic aspects of it. But I hear you. Like, I part of my concern though is about the shooting for the stars sorts of ideas. I think one, the facility master plan, I think did codify some community input on what we think the priorities are. I I love the idea of having this big picture. I'm a little concerned that we really need to have a solid foundation on some of the basic things first. That said, like there's all in the abstract. Like I don't know. I agree that I don't know what those shoot for the stars types of ideas are, but I'm not personally bothered by having this grounded in like very real things that are currently facing our school facilities.
Agreed. Just do we need to spend 100% of our money on that, or is there some room for play? Right.
Yeah, and I'd say also the additional like the facilities that offer the additional services, like maybe the kitchens don't all need to be upgraded to offer an awesome food experience, but for families that are, for students that are school dependent, like I think you could probably pretty highly correlate a solid food nutrition program to academic performance. So I don't want to lose sight of that. If they're not school dependent, yeah, maybe the food program is not the biggest priority for them, but I don't think we want to forget that. Um, can you tell us like what's the cost of not doing like the utility upgrade, like some of the district-wide things? If we say, because honestly, like they're not that exciting. I'm gonna tell you the truth, but like maybe the mundane just has to be done. So what's the cost of not doing some of the other ones?
So, and I assume by cost, you're not talking about dollars, you're talking about impact, right?
Yeah, I mean impact, but yeah, like is it going to break? And suddenly we're going to have, like
Well, I think, and I'm just kind of going down the list of the kind of those initial items is you look at, I know we've already LED and HAC, we've already committed that, and that's fine. And to Trustee Weekly's point, there's a lot of good research on LED, on lighting and HAC improvements and test scores and all of that. So there is some good work there.
Home students test well.
Exactly. I think it's so I think that there's definitely some good correlation there. But looking at the other ones, the elevator one, I think that's pretty obvious, and I think we've talked about that a little bit. But just to point that out, there's an equity issue there with folks who need to get to the different levels of the classroom. So that would definitely prevent that. And then also the cost of maintenance. We've talked about the budget crunch on the other side of the ledger that's going on right now. So we're talking about a significant amount of money that could potentially be going to other things. Then you're also talking about the utility upgrades, obviously, and I think that's not a surprise to anyone. A major utility problem could shut down a school. And it could shut down a school until you're able to fix it, and it could be significant amount of unplanned money during the school year. So I think there's that piece of it as well. The student restrooms, I think again, and I'll circle back to Trustee Weekly's point again. I think there is some discussion about students having proper restroom facilities, and there are some pretty active studies on that right now, and how they perform at school. So I think that piece, again, potentially tying back into that same discussion, but your restrooms are right now are in the best condition that Martin could keep them in, but they are aged. And so you're talking about potential fixtures breaking, and you're talking about damage to them. And then you're also talking about the safety impact and the equity of restrooms.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, because I look at it and it's like, well, the utility upgrade, the restroom upgrade, or, is the same price as like a Hoover modernization for some of their buildings there, and trying to grapple with like Cecilia's point of, hey, should we be going there? And Carl's point of, should we be, doing things where it's like you can really like deeper project at a site where you can really feel the impact of it, and see that. And those two, yeah, they're the modernization of B, C, D, and J. I don't know which buildings those are, by the way, off the top of my head, but um,
No, I think it's an excellent point and a well thought out point. All of the discussion tonight has been, but there are real consequences for sure to not doing these upgrades.
right, right, and it is capital expense, so it's like one of the things that we can do there with protecting our operating budget from having to maintain these. Uh, any other comments or questions before I ask Rick and Eric and Nick the big question of like, what, does Jen have her hand up? Yeah, sorry, I wasn't looking at Zoom.
Oh, I didn't have my hand up, but I like Cecilia's idea, given that we have some uncertainties long term about kind of our enrollment and what we're going to do across all the school sites, to maybe potentially pick a couple school sites and pilot some of these improvements and ideas, mix of what, Trustee Weekly and a mix of what Cecilia were saying, and try it out. As a district, we'd like to pilot things. Maybe we pick a school site as kind of our facilities pilot, and see how that correlates with academic achievement. But the other piece, I know uh, it's more of from a parent perspective. I remember there were a few safety items on the list. They were ranked really low, but they were also kind of on the lower cost. Um, I just feel like we should also take a look at some of the safety improvements we need to make.
Yeah, that's a good call out. I think that the reason that they ended up scoring low is because we put a low multiplier in the
Yep.
IIP score. But that was because, to the earlier point where I was asking about, climate investment, if you think of the portfolio of investment across Measure T and Measure S, Measure T had a strong investment into security improvements at the sites. All the fencing that you either love or hate, the moving of the admin buildings to the entrance so that no visitor can get onto campus without going through the admin building and that sort of stuff. So I think that multiplier is the reason why. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't go back and look at the ones that are on that and think about prioritizing them, but I think that was the reason that they got the lower score. In our last 20 minutes of discussion, what what do you need to get out of us to have this be a successful study session? Because I mean, honestly, there's a lot of variables that we don't know how to grapple with. We don't know how to solve for here. And then of course there's the what is it going to look like over time? Because, saying like, hey, we want to do, X, Y, and Z across the district, but we're going to phase it in, like we're doing HVAC, 3 schools, 3 schools, 3 schools. That gives a lot of time for the other stuff that's going on around, like is the, as we're working through our operating expenses, as our school configuration correct?
No, and I'll let Eric and Nick chime in as well. I think it's been actually a really good discussion that I've gotten a lot out of already, just being able to hear the voices and opinions of the board members going forward on this, right? There wasn't a prescribed plan. We put one together to show how the money could be utilized doing the district-wide, I'll say, projects that were noted on there, along with the 2 quick starts, and then the TKs happen to use up the remainder of those dollars for that particular scenario. I think there's definitely a lot of information that we heard tonight that we can take back and not necessarily revamp these plans that were here today, but put something together that encompasses what we heard, along with some of the other information that we may need to get right in terms of this. I think TK is ultimately important between now and winter break, right? With the registrations coming in, to see what the true impact going forward is, taking into account the other notable things happening in the district, along with programs and services, as well as what's happening with the I'm just going to call it the budget committee. I can never remember the longer fancy name. Because that will impact this as well. And those are conversations that we've had, that we need to be cognizant of that, right? And we need to be cognizant of, potentially 1,000 kids less in Redwood City in, what now, 7 or 8 years. So I think from that aspect, it's been good. I have a lot of ideas that I want to share with the team in terms of what this could look like as we progress through this, right? So that's been very positive. I don't disagree with anything said. I think everything's open for discussion. That's why we're having this. There wasn't a prescribed plan that came before the board that says, here's what we think needs to happen, please approve it, right? The full thing was we needed time as we went through this to identify things along with what was in the facilities master plan, have some of those internal discussions of what something could look like, and then get some immediate feedback tonight. So I think that's been very positive. I think it's really, from my standpoint, is there anything, not necessarily a particular project, right? I'm not looking for project X at school Y or something like that. But is there anything specific that you want to see in the next iteration, right? And taking into account, we have a lot of variables in there with TK, enrollment, budget, all that thing that we have to also address. But is there anything that was missing from that? I might not be saying it how I'm thinking it in my mind, but that will help further another discussion.
And I think themes. I think we're looking for themes. I think themes is, did we miss any themes? Did we miss anything that anybody was thinking should be a major part of the discussion?
So I got 4 for you. So one is, and I've said it before, but batteries, in terms of just resilience, we've got the solar work. That's fantastic. That was Measure T funded. Yay. If we really want resilience from PG&E and everything that's happening there and going to happen with there, we need to be able to operate schools and not close schools when PG&E has a bad day. And so I think we do need to look at that. Sound dampening has not come up in the discussions here, as far as I can tell. And that does have well-researched impact on learning rates. We've heard complaints from a number of the different school sites about, especially ones in some of our older buildings, about how loud it is in the classrooms if they're on the first floor and there's a second floor above them, and that distracts from learning. And like, again, that's been well-researched. And that's a theme that I have, you want themes? That's a theme that I haven't heard discussed here. Doesn't need to be super expensive necessarily. Third bit is like outdoor learning areas. We live in a wonderfully temperate climate. We're talking about buildings, but what about building for things that are outside of buildings, right? Climate best by government tests, says so right on the sign, right? And so if we have a chance to go and expand outdoor learning areas, that might not be super duper expensive to be something that we could go and help emphasize. And then finally, the fourth one, kind of doubling down on our libraries to really treat those as reading intervention hubs with a focus on literacy, especially TK to third literacy, to make sure that all of our students who join us in TK and kindergarten can be fully English literate by the end of third grade. Those are some facilities improvement themes that I would love to see baked out.
I think for me, just from a thematic lens, drawing from some of the discussion, I think mainly from Cecilia and from Mike, I think what would be helpful in the next iteration of this isn't necessarily project-based, but just some context that would be helpful for me would be any sort of decisions or proposals that are made on specific investments. One, what is the cost of doing nothing otherwise? And then two is, how is this an equitable decision? So for example, the discussion on Measure T not having other improvements at Hoover, for example, that's important for me to know because yeah, and there's just a long history, and having that sort of context on why it makes sense to focus on one thing at one specific site, for example, would be helpful color.
Cecilia, anything that you want to add? Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, what else would we want to see here? I mean, I think I know there's going to be some district-wide initiatives that we have to do. So again, I'm on board with doing the kitchen upgrades. I'm on board with the TK, the limited expansion as it needs to put in. But I did appreciate Carl's point of like, it is nice to be able to see the impact when it's concentrated into a place there. And Cecilia's point of, yeah, Hoover needing that one. And so that's the kind of, I think, as I'm thinking about like which ones would we want to slot in, it would be more of that kind of mix. And I think it's probably possible. Like if we come back with a plan that says this is the amount of TK that we think we're going to need, we can do it concentrated at this. Maybe we'll pick the sites, independently and put that in. But leave space for, making a meaningful improvement for a school or two and figuring out like how do we, with an equity lens, pick the site that we think should be needs it and would really benefit the students the most. And it's not just to be a showy thing that we can put on the website and say, look at all these good things, although I appreciate the PR aspect of it. But, showing that kind of investment into a school, it can really make the students in the communities there feel like they belong at that school and that they're really cared for. And seeing that kind of major upgrade as opposed to as many of these kind of like I don't want to call them watered down, but sort of spread thin across the whole district. I think we need to have that mix.
So I would just, one of the things on the discussion points was trade-offs between spreading resources across many schools, right, versus concentrating on major projects. So more of a mix of that then, right? Something major
Yeah.
is what I'm hearing. And I kind of heard it from multiple, perhaps, right?
Have you heard it from multiple? I'm just checking.
I said major projects, but there's been some, Hoover, for example, right? That would be a major project.
Yeah.
The
Right.
thing too, I know we're talking facilities, but academic wise, maybe, and again, I'm just focusing on Hoover, but not that I mean to say that that is a special school. We also have, a lot of rotating, I can't think of the word of teachers, a fluctuating of teachers coming in. So perhaps if Hoover, was looking better, they would be more comfortable teaching at Hoover, and therefore that would then, although we're talking facilities, would then come up and make better academic progress. I mean, again, it's just a thought. I mean, I know that, again, this is a discussion. The kitchen, of course, at every school, whether we choose to do maybe two locations, one on the Bay side, one on this side, where the food can get distributed however it's going to, because obviously a full stomach would make students learn just better than just going to school without eating. A lot of the times they might eat a lot more at school than they do at their own home. So another thought for with the kitchen.
Sorry, I'll just clarify. I'm not advocating for anything in particular. I'm open to it, but I just don't think I have enough information to weigh that. And I think the district has a lot more expertise probably and where these lenses can come from. So I'm more interested in just making sure that once proposals are made, that I have that lens.
So you're saying that, and here's why. We're putting this on the list, and here's why, because here's the cost of not doing it, or here's the, this one didn't get upgraded in Measure T, and all of that kind of stuff. That makes sense.
I think that's everything.
I feel like we didn't drive to any conclusion here, but you're telling me you got the information you needed, so.
I don't think it was really I won't speak for Eric and Nick. It wasn't that we were going to have a definitive roadmap that we were just going to go back and say, oh, well, this meets the 10 things that the board said tonight, right? It was more to stick the toe in the water, so to speak, bring some information to you so that we could have this conversation. We obviously have work to do after this, right? But I didn't expect to walk out of here with a 80% implementation plan that we were going to go and look for 20% and then bring it back in 2 weeks, right? We know that this is going to take a little bit longer. But I think, and I'll say again, I got a lot of what I felt I needed in terms of being able to go back with the team, do some work, and then be able to bring it back.
No, I completely agree with you, Rick. These are such difficult decisions. They can't be made in silos. We couldn't have come today and just said, hey, this is what we think. We have to be able to hear from this group and hear everything from everybody on what they think the priorities are going to be and what their vision for this is. So I in my mind, this was very successful. So thank you for the time tonight.
Yeah, I'll echo both of those comments. It's just part of the process of doing an implementation plan, and we have to do it together to talk all this out. And so we have more information to come back with something that, you guys could glom on to more. So that brings us to next steps, right? So the plan would be, we're going to take all these comments, we're going to brainstorm, we'll come back to you guys again and get more comments. And at some point, we will get to an implementation plan that we'll bring to the board for approval. And then, part of that will be establishing project priorities and phasing, and cash flow and all those things that are included in an implementation plan. And then once we finally have an approved one, we would immediately start engaging architects and doing programming and design for those first level of projects.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I do also want to acknowledge the comment about like gathering community input. I thought there was a lot of community input for the facilities master plan and a lot of outreach for that one there. But I think that as we go through this prioritization, I don't have a suggestion tonight. I don't think we're going to come up with a suggestion tonight, but I would like us to also think about, like, as we're thinking about how to put these prioritizations together, and maybe more input around like the framework for prioritizing, something along those lines, that we could think of a way to gather that input, either having the trustees go out and get it from our community, or using some district resources to. I don't think a survey feels right for this. We're also doing so many surveys for other important initiatives. It really feels like that would be kind of diluted. So I don't have a great suggestion, but I just want to acknowledge that I do think that there's an opportunity for us to pull in more community feedback on the prioritization framework. And we'll mull it over time.
I think Mike, in the last or one of the previous meetings, I think Trustee Lee had asked to do a gut check on the IOQs with some of the site councils. Did that ever happen, or?
I don't know. Do you know?
David, sorry, I remember you wanting to.
Yes, yes, I do remember asking that, and I remember going separately to different school sites to check with just the principals when I was visiting, but I don't remember whether or not that was something that we officially heard back on. I think, yeah, maybe I'll let the district speak to that.
And Nick, please, I believe after that, shortly after the IOQ scores were sent to the principals for review.
That's correct.
And
Yeah.
then it was up to them to reconvene or bring back together a committee to look at those scores. But tonight I don't have any feedback for you.
Right. And the site admins got to see the facilities master plan for their site and review it for that one as well.
Right, now that I feel so long ago, I think, yeah, as I recall, it was the facility master plans were sent out. I think feedback was solicited from principals and teams as appropriate on whether or not the priorities that ended up on the FMP aligned generally with what their expectations were. And I believe the next iteration, when we had a meeting, the team had made some adjustments in accordance with some of the feedback that they received. That is my general recollection.
Yeah, there definitely was an adjustment to the IOQs based on feedback from the principals at the end of the process.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Then I think we can end the study session unless anyone has, I see no comment. I see someone ready to help take action on our next item, which is adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Is there a second? Do we do a roll call for adjournment too? We have it in the past. We've said it's okay to not to.
Yeah, I think technically adjournment, it's
All in favor?
Bye.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.